Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Week 12 NFL Power Rankings by tier. Jake Ciely on the line with me. Sir, I have expanded my tier 1 for the first time all year.
Finally? Is that only because the Chiefs lost, or is that because you're come around on some other teams?
It's because the Chiefs lost. So Buffalo is clearly the best team in the league now, right?
No.
Well, why?
Because they still have 2 losses. I'm not going to knock out the Chiefs off 1 loss where they still could have won that game.
So you still have the Chiefs at number 1?
Yeah, I'd still take the Chiefs. I'd still take the Chiefs over the Bills in the playoffs. That's it. They've gone back and forth over the past couple of years. I'll give Bills credit in that game. I'm actually kind of so I wrote this up for a fantasy perspective on the fact that Spagnuolo, when he faces Josh Allen over the last couple of seasons, as it drops down as they blitz less, because the funny thing is Josh Allen is ridiculously heading into that game. It was either 10 or 11 touchdowns when blitzed to 0 interceptions, and he's actually more erratic when he's not under pressure or blitzed. So you saw it like last year's playoff game. They only blitzed like 20% of the time. It was the lowest in years. And then they kind of changed a little bit yesterday, and they kind of went back and they got beat at times. But I still think they could have won that game. I think the Bills could have even won by more. Like, I could see that game swinging either direction watching that entire thing. And that's why I'm saying, you know what? Yeah, the Bills took them in that game. I don't know if this game goes 10. Is 6 to the Chiefs and 4 to the Bills? I would still take the Chiefs in the playoffs. And people can call me crazy because they just lost the heads up, but I think the Bills' other losses are uglier than this. It's kind of like the Ohio State Penn State thing in college football right now. That's why.
I have no idea what's going on in college football. What's going on?
They both have 1 loss, and Penn State's trying to claim that their big loss is only to Ohio State, and Ohio State's is only losses to Oregon, which is the number 1 team. So it's kind of like whose loss is better? Well, yeah, you could argue that the loss is to the Bills, but I think the 2 other Bills' losses are worse than losing to the Bills for the Chiefs.
Well, I said I was going to keep Kansas City at number 1 until they lost, because overall they just don't look all that impressive, and they have not looked all that impressive. But what I didn't do was keep Detroit on a tier by themselves at number 1, because look, everyone beats Jacksonville. It was my best bet of the week was minus 13.5 for Detroit. You expected them to run a train on Jacksonville with a backup quarterback and a bunch of dudes injured. So I have a 6-team tier 1 right now, which I'm pretty excited for as we head into the playoffs. I have Detroit moving up a spot from 2 to 1. Buffalo goes from 4 to 2. Philly goes from 6 to 3. Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore. And honestly, that Pittsburgh thing is a bit disingenuous, because I think that I would still, in the playoffs, take Baltimore over Pittsburgh. But right now, they just played. Pittsburgh won, so let's go with Pittsburgh.
So similar to my argument for the Chiefs is that you think in the playoffs, which I'm not going to argue with you too much. Honestly, if you didn't have Pittsburgh and Baltimore in this tier, I wouldn't even they kind of almost feel like the draft process this year when the wide receivers, I had the big 3, and then Brian Thomas was he's too good for tier 2, but you can argue that he's just not quite the amazing level of Malik Neighbors or what we thought Marvin Harrison should and hopefully will turn into. So if you want to say they're kind of on their island and in that division against each other, but I'm not going to fault you for having them there. I wouldn't fault you. My point being, I want to fault you for not having them this tier. They feel like they are the back end of it, but I think the big 4, in my opinion, are definitively the Lions, Chiefs, Bills, and Eagles.
Who do you think's going to win the Super Bowl?
Well, do I stick with my pick, or do I change? I honestly have to change it, because originally I had Texans over Lions, and that's not happening. But I might get the Lions on there in the NFC side of things. You know what? Until the champs are beat, you still have to take the Chiefs. The Chiefs and the Eagles are the same thing you and I keep talking about this entire season. It's they are not even doing what we think. Maybe they can't. That's why I was about to say think. Maybe they can't do what we think they can do. Maybe this whole conversation is they're still not playing their A game. Maybe this is. Maybe they don't have an A game that's another level. This is their A game. And maybe the argument is that the Bills should beat them and the Lions should beat the Eagles, because if they can get waxed by the Buccaneers in their game plan, then they're not that good. But it still feels like there's more to both of those teams.
I would tend to agree with you. And I mean, San Francisco, when we get to them, is obviously in the same boat, just on a bigger tier down because they keep losing games. But it just seems like all these teams are really close. San Francisco, obviously, a lot farther away from being peak San Francisco, at least what we think they can achieve, than those other two teams. But it does feel like the Chiefs and Eagles, you're right, that we haven't seen 100% of what they're capable of yet. They're just kind of sleepwalking, and they combined have 3 losses.
Exactly. And the big thing for the Eagles, which we're going to talk about, I know not you and I, but like on my podcast and stuff like that, for a fantasy perspective, is that secondary starting to be very worrisome as a matchup as those young corners continue to develop, where now their defense is concerning as well. So I think, honestly, if you told me rest of season who's more likely to hit their A game, it kind of feels like it's the Eagles because theirs was health and now they're healthy. Although Devonta Smith is still banged up. And the defense is coming around, like they feel closer. Like the Chiefs, every single week, it's just everything. Something's always off every single week.
It is, but this is no different than what we saw last year. Then all of a sudden on January 1st, it's like, all right, let's start trying now.
Right. Well, that's what I'm hoping, and I'm hoping that's right. So, as a toss-up, I agree with you. Like I'd still take the Ravens over the Steelers in the playoffs, even though they just lost. Would you take the Chiefs or the Bills in the playoffs, or is it going to come down to who has the home game?
Probably what comes down to who has the home game in this matchup. Although the Bills haven't been great. I mean, they lost to Cincinnati at home in the playoffs. I think it was 2 years ago. So it's not just like there's this huge home field advantage. I don't think that the Bills would be really all that penal going to Kansas City. Weirdly enough, just how they've transformed their team over the past few years from being like, man, if they could just play in a dome the entire playoffs, they would beat everyone, to now like they kind of need to play outdoors. Like they've really shifted to take advantage of their home field. So I think that going outdoors for them isn't a problem. And really, there's nowhere besides Houston in the AFC that you would have to go indoors and play, is there? Chargers?
In the plays right now, the Chargers indoors. But you're probably not heading to the Chargers. Oh, I mean, the Chargers keep playing like this. Maybe they will be.
It'll be tough for them to catch the Chiefs is the only part. Like, the Bills winning that game is so much bigger for them. I mean, for Kansas City, it's like, whatever. You lose. It's probably better that they lost at some point and not continue to go undefeated, because then you have all this, like, weird extra pressure on top of the three-peat when you're not playing all that well. So, getting the one loss kind of takes it off. I think this kind of opens the floodgates for a few losses for Kansas City, though. I could see them losing another 2 or 3 games.
What do they got?
They have Carolina this week, so that's. But
then they have the Raiders, Chargers, Browns, Texans, Steelers. So I could see that. But they're going to get back on track with the Panthers and Raiders. Maybe Upsetville at home, though, for the Chargers, and then at Cleveland, maybe home against the Texans, at Pittsburgh, at Denver. I could legitimately see them losing 2 or 3 more games. I don't know if it's going to be. Do you think it's just because they got caught, or they don't care? Which way are you going with the losses starting to rack up?
They've been playing with fire now for a while. They probably should have 3 or 4 losses already, and they don't. They should have lost week 1 to the Ravens. They should have lost the Cincinnati game. They should have lost last week to Denver. They did lose to the Bills. There's 4 games just off the top of my head that were coin flip at best, in which they won a game that they probably shouldn't have. That, I don't know, just this stuff catches up to you throughout the course of the season. It was like when San Francisco looked unbeatable last year, and then Cuss said they were probably going to go undefeated for the rest of the year. Then they lost 3 in a row. They lost in Cleveland at a random time. It's like, all right. Weird shit happens in the NFL all the time.
Well, then, so is the question that we need to ask Tim, does he think the Chiefs are going to rebound and go undefeated for the rest of the year?
Well,
we have our answer.
He said, I think it was 2 weeks ago on the show, that he became a Chiefs fan and that they were going to go undefeated. So that's
okay. Yeah, he should have locked that one. Hey, look at that. He almost got the loss last week, too.
Almost. They ended up coming through. What do you make of Pittsburgh? Because I can't quite wrap my mind around it. I asked Gary and Tim on the Sunday recap show, sort of like an in-the-moment type question, is that besides Mike Tomlin and the Tomlin voodoo that goes on, what really differentiates Week 12 Pittsburgh from Week 12 Denver? When you look at the beginning of the year, Denver with Nick starting, he's learning the speed of the NFL. They lose their first 2 games. The defense is okay, it's not great. But over the past 4 weeks, Nick's has been legitimately good, and the defense is good. And everything that we kind of say about Pittsburgh, Denver kind of is at this moment, whether it's sustainable, whether they keep doing it, or whether they regress a little bit. I actually don't think those teams are that far off.
I don't think they're that far off from each other. I think the biggest thing that you would say is you got the veteran presence of Russell Wilson versus a rookie. No matter how good Bo Nix has looked, that he's still a rookie. And I still, even in yesterday's game, it was a very good game by Nix. You still saw the moments of his flaws in that one. Russell Wilson, look, he's the veteran. He's going to do what he does. Like, he made mistakes. And, like, Russell Wilson's going to, but that's Russell Wilson. But we also know what he can do to win games, or at least manage to win games. And I think the biggest difference, I would say, from those two teams, I agree with you, they're not that far off. But I think the biggest takeaway is not just the veteran presence, because you could argue the coaching is similar between Sean Payton and Mike Tomlin. It's the backfield. I think 100% the backfield of the Steelers is much better. And even though Javonte Williams had a good day yesterday, nobody in the world should or does trust that backfield 1 week to the next. So much so that Sean Payton doesn't even trust the backfield 1 week to the next. So it really comes down to you have two legitimate options in Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, who could be leaders on half the teams in the NFL versus the mess that they got over there. So I say that's the biggest difference. And the way these teams play, that's important, because if needed and you need to grind out a game, and I think the Steelers can, I don't know that the Broncos can grind out a game.
Interesting. I think that they potentially could. And I think that one of the reasons that we don't give, and myself included, like when you look at the tiers, obviously Pittsburgh is in tier 1, Denver is not, that you have those veterans, you just have players that you're more familiar with. And you know that this is the level that they play at. With Denver, it's just a lot of unknown players. Like, there was no better bet in football on the weekend than estimate under rushing yards everywhere. Like, that's what I took, because I'm familiar with this Denver backfield and how Sean Payton rolls these guys out. Like, yeah, you really think he's going to get 20 carries again? Nah, that's not happening.
I don't think anybody expected him to get 20, but I don't think anybody also expected him to get almost nil. That's the biggest thing. That's because
you need to watch the weekend show with Pat Mayo where he breaks down the props. That's what I said.
No. The under. I'm saying, did you really expect him to get nothing?
Yeah, I expected
negative yards.
I didn't expect him to get negative yards, but I said he'd be third in this backfield. That's probably the most likely outcome.
Okay, well then, kudos to you. Fair. That I thought worst case that it was probably going to be like a split. I didn't expect him to get the bell cow work, but we took a chance on it, and kudos to you on that one. Biggest thing is that even coming with the split, that still meant didn't trust Sean Payton, saying that hey, we're going to get us estimate more work, and that's the Sean Payton life. But that's what I'm saying. Like, coming next week, is it really going to be Javonte Williams? We've already played Javonte Williams going in the circles, and that's all I'm coming back to, is that I don't trust Bo Nix or the backfield to be able to play a game that, like, you tell me they have to play Baltimore, the Steelers can win that game, and they just did. There's no way, like, I would not take, out of 10 times, maybe one, just because Lamar Jackson got hurt, that the Ravens lose that game against the Broncos, even in Denver.
I see, and I agree with you. I think that Baltimore in particular is a really bad matchup for Denver. I also think that, like, Buffalo would be a really bad matchup for Denver. Teams with awesome offenses, because how can I construct this properly? Denver's defense is good, but it feels like they can only be really good at 2 instead of 3 facets of the game, that they're going to be vulnerable somewhere. So when you have an offense that can actually take advantage of that, well, that's what we saw in the Baltimore game. They were like, hey, we're not going to let Lamar go crazy and beat us all around. And Lamar threw all over them, and then they just got sieved by Derrick Henry at the end of the game. Where Pittsburgh wasn't able to do that. But just, like, if you rerun the game that Pittsburgh did not play well against Baltimore. It's just Baltimore happened to play even worse in that game. Now, you could say that's because Pittsburgh played so well defensively, but just so many uncharacteristic bonehead plays and missed field goals from the Ravens. Like, you play that exact game in the same conditions with the same players 10 times. Baltimore probably wins 7 of the 10 of them.
And I agree with you. And that was kind of the argument before with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. But that's my point about Pittsburgh versus the Broncos, is that the Steelers can win an ugly game like that. It's not a game they should win the majority of the time, but they could. And I don't see Bo Nix in that backfield ever doing that. So that's where I agree. They're similar in the fact that they shouldn't be a huge gap between them. Like, it shouldn't be Pittsburgh and then 7 teams in the Broncos, and the Broncos should be all the way down by the Jets or something like that. But I do think it is, as you said, a completely different tier because of that. And despite their similarities, I think that's going to be the biggest downfall for the Broncos. As of today, I mean, if you told me the Broncos don't make the playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I don't even think they're still a lock, even though they've been playing really well of late.
They're pretty close to a lock at this point. Like the AFC is starting to get wrapped up pretty well. The teams that can catch them, I mean, you have Indy and Miami trying to catch them. And those two teams aren't good.
They're not, but I think a healthy Tua and Miami, it depends on the schedules. What do the Broncos have for the rest of the I know they have the Chiefs at the end of the season. They got the Bengals. They go to the Chargers.
The Broncos go at the Raiders, home Browns, home. Like if they play the Colts at home 3 weeks from now, like they win that game, they're probably good. Because what happens with Miami is they have, let's see here, they have the Patriots and Jets twice. Like, they could most definitely lose a game to the Jets. They're at the Texans, and they're at the 49ers, and they're at the Packers.
And at Packers.
Yeah, like, their schedule might be too tough to get there.
I was just about to say, that's a brutal schedule. Let's check out the Colts then.
Well, but the Colts game, they have to beat Denver. If they don't beat Denver, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, they got the Titans, Giants. See, that's the thing, though. They also got the Titans, Giants, and Jaguars. So if they do beat Denver, I think, okay, so the Colts are probably their biggest threat. The fact that the Jets lost really helps. And then, of course, the Bengals losing really helps. So really, okay, their biggest threat is probably the Colts.
It is, but if Denver beats the Colts, it's probably over because then the Colts would actually have to get ahead of them in wins after dropping that game. So let's just say Denver beats Indianapolis in 3 weeks. Then they're 2.5 games ahead realistically because Denver gets the one up and then the Colts get the one down in terms of the win-loss, and then the tiebreak goes to Denver in that situation that the Colts would be kind of screwed. Like, weirdly enough, the team that could actually catch Denver is actually still Cincinnati, and they're not going to do it because their defense sucks.
No, they would have to pretty much win out. Yes. Maybe lose one more. But
no.
Yeah, so
they would have to win out. They'd have to go 10-7, and that just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for them.
Okay, so the AFC is down to 8 teams, conceivably.
Yeah, unless Miami gets really hot and beats the Pack. Like, they could beat the Packers in Green Bay. I wouldn't say it's likely. Like, if I flipped a coin.
No, but you're going to say, like, they could have, like, 4 different games the rest of the way.
Absolutely. Jared, do you have the AFC playoff picture up on the screen? Yeah, let's get that up there and take a look at what the matchups would be right now. Because I don't see that much changing in the AFC in terms of how the playoffs. Well,
here's the other problem with the Dolphins, just to jump in too. Oh, the Dolphins are 3-4 in the conference, but I was just about to say, actually, the Broncos are 2-4 in the conference already.
I don't think it's going to matter because the one team that could catch them is the team that they get to play, and if they beat them, then the conference record doesn't matter.
No, I was going to say your point about like if Miami got hot. They actually do have one extra win in the conference versus them, but I still don't. I think that's such a bad schedule for that to happen.
All right, so here's what we're looking for on the AFC side. Do you think there's a chance that Buffalo or Pittsburgh can grab the 1 seed here?
Not Pittsburgh. I think Buffalo could.
So that would make it a lot of fun if you went KC, Denver. Let's just play the game of Buffalo gets the 1 seed, Kansas City gets the 2 seed, and everything else stays the same. Although Baltimore probably passes the Chargers and gets that back. I mean, they play each other this Monday night, so that would help out Baltimore if it came down to those teams ending up tying. But this is a great path for the Chargers, though. The Chargers in this scenario could go at Houston. I mean, they'd probably be within 3 points in terms of the spread of Houston. I think most people at this point in time would probably take the Chargers in that game against the Texans. And then Buffalo would be number 1. In this scenario, let's say Baltimore beats Pittsburgh. You'd get Baltimore, Kansas City, and Chargers, Buffalo. Like that's pretty spicy.
It is. Wait, no, you would get if the Buffalo's the 1 seed, then you would get Buffalo, Baltimore.
Oh yeah, let's say Pittsburgh wins. Then you get Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and then you get the Chargers, Buffalo. Yeah, then you get Baltimore Ravens in round 2. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, so to go to that, why I don't think the Steelers can do that all to your point about the Colts, similar thing. They win that game on December 21st in Baltimore. That might be the difference for the Steelers right there. But the Steelers' schedule, this has been the one that we were talking about for fantasy all along. And it started with the game against the Ravens. They still have to do this the rest of the season. At Cleveland, at Cincinnati, Cleveland at home, at Philly, at Baltimore, home to the Chiefs, and then home to the Bengals, which might not matter at that point. But it looks like with that schedule, similar to the Dolphins, a brutal schedule. This is why we were worried about it in fantasy, but it's going to probably come down to that at Baltimore game as long as they win the games they should, which they should on paper win both Browns games and the Bengals. The Eagles one's probably going to be tough. That at Eagles, at Baltimore, and then to come back home for the Chiefs, that's a rough 3.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah, I don't see anyone else making the move in the AFC. So let's talk about tier 2 in terms of the power rankings then. I have the Chargers at number 7. That's up from number 9. I moved Denver from 17 to 8 in the power rankings.
Huge jump.
Minnesota. Well, I've been waiting. And like Atlanta's not great, but it's a good win for them. And they've been consistently racking these up. They've been really good against the NFC as well. Minnesota jumps from 13 to 9. Like that. Did that game even really happen? I'm not quite sure.
That was miserable. I don't know what the hell that was.
Like we have 8 TVs set up. That was we instead of putting that game on a TV, we just put Red Zone on just to keep track of, hey, if anything happens on this game, we'll see the highlights.
Wait. Do you? So you have the option where you can change the multi-view package of 4?
No, we don't. In Canada we don't have the YouTube TV Sunday ticket. We just have channel by channel Sunday ticket. So I have 8 TVs. I just put them all on the channels.
Okay. All right. I got you. Oh, yeah, that's right. You have that cool little setup. No, like I've been frustrated because certain TVs and areas you can choose the box, and then I have to spend 5 minutes every Sunday being like, all right, let me get all 8 games and like scroll until I find the perfect matchup where they don't overlap. I still had that one on, but that was one that I checked in probably least or second least.
Chargers, Denver, Minnesota, Green Bay stays at 10, and Houston stays at 11. That's my tier 2. Houston's hanging on by a thread here.
They are. It's nitpicky. I would still take the Packers over the Broncos.
Green Bay doesn't look. You want to talk about a team that can't get their shit together? It's Green Bay.
And that's why, like, I was going to the similar argument to the Eagles and the Chiefs is like they're still 7-3.
No, but they've never been as good as those teams. They benefited greatly through a great Jordan Love stretch for like 6 weeks at the end of last year, and the NFC kind of weirdly beat themselves up. Like Philly took themselves out of the running last year the moment Jalen Hurts got hurt and tried to play through it. They just weren't good anymore. That it was a weaker NFC a year ago, and Love just doesn't look as good, and he's hurt.
Sure. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. This year specifically, so they lost week 1 to the Eagles, but that was a close game. They lost, what was the other close game they lost? To the Vikings. They lost that game where there was the whole...
That also wasn't a close game. Minnesota was up like 24-0 at half.
Yeah, I know. But then that's why we got the complete opposite version of the Vikings in the second half.
We got garbage time Jordan Love for 30 minutes. It was great.
And then the Lions game, which that one, like, again, to go back to why the hell was Jordan Love even playing in that game with the weather and all that type of stuff. So those are the 3. Jordan Love continues to throw interceptions, but I'm not disagreeing with the whole conversation we've been having a lot this year about Jordan Love and last year in that stretch. Like, that's a complete sidebar. It's just I'm saying the Packers are not on the level. I wasn't saying that. I'm saying they're similar in the fact of the Eagles and the Chiefs that they are winning. They are 7-3. They have, okay, I'll even throw that out. They have one close loss, one where they shouldn't have even been in it with the garbage time, and then the other one which call me stupid if you want, which people will, but I'm throwing out the Lions' loss to like that wasn't a true evaluation. If anything, I think the defense holding in check with the Lions that game, and yes, there's weather involved, I kind of give them credit, and that's where I would say I put the Packers over the Broncos because I think their defense is underrated. I think everybody focuses on Love and that this offense can't get any kind of semblance of consistency. The wide receivers are anybody different any given week, but I think that's part of their strength is that they can turn to a different wide receiver any single week, and they are winning despite the fact that Jordan Love is playing erratic, where I think if they are clicking down the stretch, I would take the Packers over the Broncos. That's my only argument is that I just feel like I think they're a team that's better than what we've seen, and they're still a 7-3 team.
I don't know if they are better than this. Like, they should have lost yesterday to the Bears. They didn't. They beat them by 1. They probably could have lost to the Jags 2 weeks ago in Jacksonville. They won that game by 3. They beat the Texans by 2 at the last second. They blow out the Cardinals. That's like their one good win. They barely beat the Rams. They barely beat the Colts. They kicked the shit out of the Titans because it's the Titans are the worst team in the league. Of course, that's going to happen, but there's just been nothing impressive about them so far this year. They kind of looked better when Malik Willis was their quarterback.
I'm not going that far.
It's just they looked like a team who had an identity when Malik Willis was playing. With Love, they're just really sporadic.
And that's when I'm agreeing with you. Is that's part of Jordan Love's play so far this year? Or not so far, but this entire year. But again, whether or not that's him or if it's playing through the injury or whatever it might be, I just think there's better for them. But I mean, we're not going to agree on everybody in this rankings. the biggest issue I have, and I know that recency bias is not, I don't want to say bias because that sounds like you're not making a good argument. I would say just the recent play. I would still keep the Commanders in this tier.
And I have them as the top of the next tier because I'm worried that, well, we'll get to that in a second. I just want to talk about Houston. Obviously, they haven't played yet in Week 11. They played Dallas on Monday night. I did bet them -7 to win, so I hope that they can cover that number. I did make an underdog.
If they lose, they're not going to be in this tier.
Yeah, you can check the updated power rankings in the newsletter. If Houston loses this game, they're getting dropped down. Just a little bit, maybe a lot in the rankings. But Nico is back. That's great news. I just think of it this way. So here are the 3 underdog plays that I went with. And if you use code Mayo at Underdog right now, you can double the payout on this entry just by using the CJ Stroud free pick. So I'd recommend that you do that. Take this from 6.5 to 13 to 1 if you want to. I went Mixon higher than 90 rushing yards. Dallas can't stop the run, and they can't pass block. Why would you even put Stroud into that situation where Micah Parsons might eat his lunch? Just give it to Mixon 30 times, and you're going to win this game. That's a strategy offensively. I went Cooper Rush under passing yards, mainly because I think that he might, if he plays poorly for a quarter and a half, you'll see Trey Lance come into the game.
Get benched.
Yeah, and listen, Houston just made a mockery of Detroit's O-line, which is probably the best O-line in the league. The Cowboys have one of the worst O-lines in the league, and they have Cooper Rush, so I just expect to see hands in his faces. And the one that I went out on a limb on, it pays 1.12. Why? This is why it's 6 to 1, 6.5 to 1, not 6 to 1. CeeDee Lamb higher than half a rushing yard. He's beat it in 5 of 6 games.
I actually don't mind that. I was going to say, I had CeeDee Lamb when I ran the projections this week. I've had him for like 10 rushing yards. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's like he's kind of been doing that. And especially with how the offense is right now, I actually thought you might lean to Joe Mixon just over in carries, whatever that number might be, too.
It was like 21.5.
Was it really?
That's a lot.
But do you remember the end of last year when Kyron Williams was at 2021 and he was still smashing it at the end of the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I lost $2,000, like a $2,000 entry because I didn't flex it. I got 4 of the 5 right, and the only one that I got wrong was Jonathan Taylor higher rushing yards against the Jets because I looked at the number. I think it was 20.5 rushing attempts. Like, if he gets to the higher, he's most definitely going to get the higher of the yardage. No,
and he did get the higher.
He had 21 carries in the first half against the Jets.
And couldn't get anything. That was abysmal. What did he end up with, like 58 rushing yards or something like that?
Yeah, but it's funny because you could have run on the Jets all year long. Everyone has ran on the Jets all year long. But I think this is where, and then one of the main reasons why I don't think that the Colts end up making a run and making the playoffs, especially with Anthony Richardson. And I get that they won the game. That's great and everything. It's just they sold out to stop the one thing that they do poorly, and they know Indianapolis does well. Run with Jonathan Taylor and be like, you know what? We'll throw some 50-50 balls up there. If you have to beat us through the passing game, Anthony Richardson, that's what we're allowing you to do. So I could see teams just going out of their way to stopping Jonathan Taylor and hoping Richardson doesn't have like 2 or 3 good throws in the game.
And I'm really interested to see what happens with the Lions next week. For that being the Colts, is because I think that was part of the issue yesterday. Is like you said, there was some routes just Josh Downs, but Josh Downs is Josh Downs, essentially like running free. And I forget which one it was, but that one, not even the diving catch that Downs made. It was the one that Richardson hit, which is kind of under a scramble play, where it was the one where he was running and threw it off like kind of like the side army, and it still was almost sailed too high. And I don't think it was Downs on that one. But like to your point, it's like Richardson played better-ish.
Yeah.
But like I don't think that like everything's fixed.
No, he most definitely did not play poorly in the game. I'm just saying that they're giving him the ability to pass. And that's what defenses are going to do against. Be like, hey, you want to beat us? Tony, you can go throw. How about that? Because JT's not running for 150 against us.
So, I think Taylor's interesting, especially down the stretch. That's going to be tough because you also got Denver in there. Tennessee's defense is good. So, maybe not bet the over too much on Jonathan Taylor. So, those are your 3. I like your 3. Joe Mixon one I really like. That's why I thought you were going for Kip. So the yards I'm okay with 100%.
Yeah, the biggest thing, I like Indy's D for the fantasy playoffs. They have 3 really soft matchups, but a fantasy defense to watch out for. And this is not breaking news, but it could be a good situation for you to get yourself into. I noticed that the Chargers were dropped a lot this week because they played Cincinnati this week and they played Baltimore on Monday night. So they're not going to be a hot pickup. You don't want to stream against Baltimore. And I guess if you're Pittsburgh this week, it worked out. But generally speaking, you you don't want to play against the Ravens as a fantasy D. So some people with the Chargers might be forced to drop them because there's 6 teams on bye. Go get the Chargers for the fantasy
15
playoffs.
through 17 is terrific.
If they just somehow like spend your fab on the Chargers, and that this is the one opportunity that you might get to get them, because they should be most definitely 100% owned, especially by any team that is making the fantasy playoffs. It's just this weird scheduling thing with Cincinnati, then Baltimore on back-to-back weeks, one in prime time, plus the bye weeks, plus injuries at receiver where other people need the bench space, that they might become available. Use the spot. You don't need to have Adam Thielen or Jalen Coker at the back end of your bench. You're never going to play them. You know who you are going to play? The Chargers defense in week number 15, 16, and 17. Bucks, Broncos, Patriots. Now, Bucks and Broncos looking a little bit better coming around right now.
They're both at home.
But they're both at home. And listen, they basically shut out the Cincinnati offense in the first half. Now, Cincinnati's offense eventually got to them. Those teams don't have Cincinnati's offense.
No, they don't. And the other reason, to your point of why they might have, so not just last week, but also this week, Baltimore. But if people are looking ahead, I mean, like, oh, well, you know, I might as well drop them because after Atlanta, they still have Kansas City on the schedule too. So, like, I actually expect them to be pretty widely owned, or widely available to be owned.
Yeah, like I've picked up Indianapolis in leagues where I'm making the playoffs just as my defense bench stash. And obviously you don't want to play them this week at Detroit, but they do have some nice matchups overall coming up. If I saw the Chargers available, I would make that swap instantly.
Let me ask you this. Would you risk, because, you know, you're looking for, you know, people ask me and they're like, any defenses under like 40% or 35% that you think, and no, well, besides the only other one, Tampa. But it's a terrible defense. Yes, it's such a terrible defense. They got the Cowboys and the Panthers in back-to-back weeks, but like they have no pass defense.
So I got Indy. I have Arizona as number 2. They get New England, Carolina.
I like Arizona a lot.
New England, Carolina, and then the Rams. Like most of these are 2 of 3 weeks. Like I probably wouldn't want to play them at the Rams, but New England, Carolina looks good. Jacksonville gets the Jets, Las Vegas, and Tennessee, if you can stomach that.
I don't know if I don't think the Jets. So where the Bucks don't have a pass defense, the Jaguars just don't have a defense. Actually, to go back previously when you were like the worst team in the league, and you said the Titans, like no, it's the Jaguars.
It's one of the two. With Mac Jones starting at quarterback, I agree with you.
Yes.
Atlanta is another one. At Vegas, at home, Giants, at Washington. You probably don't want the at Washington, but those first 2 weeks are pretty good.
The first 2. Especially with Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets.
Oh man, how are they starting? Like this is a tank move, right? Starting Cutlets over Drew Lock.
You would think, but the funniest thing is like watching Twitter and the Giants fan base not knowing who's worse for tank or who's better for either way. Like there's people out there like, oh man, they're starting Tommy DeVito and they're actually going to win games and ruin their draft pick. And like, that's how bad we think of Drew Lock. So I think either way you cut it, Cutlets. I really do think DeVito is worse, honestly, because Drew Lock will take shots and you might just get beat by the fact that let's go back to the Daniel Jones game where the 3 touchdowns, like you might just get shots downfield that Lock takes and all of a sudden it's like, boom, they accidentally score 2 touchdowns and win a game.
Drew Lock has at least appeared in moments to be an NFL quarterback. Tommy DeVito is a fucking mascot.
With his agent who legit dressed us up like a bad knockoff Godfather, honestly.
Yeah, he dresses up as like a low-level 30s gangster. This guy's a fucking moron. I hate Tommy DeVito so much. Seems like a real nice guy and everything. Like, get your bucks, pal. But like, I just don't want. It'd be like there were Bears fans calling for Bagnet to play over Caleb Williams. Like, what do you people like? Is the crack that good?
No,
that you're smoking it.
No,
it's
you
like,
know
oh,
where
man,
that
I'm
originated from? That originated from his dad. His dad was online campaigning to get Badgett at quarterback, and it turned into this whole thing.
Introducing to you the TGL presented by SoFi Golf's newest league, live on ESPN and ESPN+. This is a simulator plus real chipping, real grass, and real green league featuring some of the PGA Tour's biggest players like Tiger and Rory and Xander. Only 2-hour matches inside of a stadium and has other sporting elements like timeouts, refs, and overtime. You tee off from real grass into a screen. You might end up in the rough, or sand, real sand, and have to play it back into the screen out of there after that. They use the technology to drop it by a real green side area plus a real putting surface, getting everyone involved in the contest. This isn't your average Sunday pickup game. To learn more, visit tglgolf.com and tune into the inaugural season beginning January 7th. Keep up. It's golf. We're at the time of year where people are going to ask you what you want for a gift, and you're going to say, I don't want anything, or I don't know. Here's an answer. Doer. My Doer pants I got last week are the most comfortable pieces of clothing that I own. I got a pair of denim stretch jeans and these joggers. These joggers are amazing. You get them in a whole bunch of colors, but they don't look like joggers. So when you go out into public, I mean, we would wear crappy jogging pants out in public because they're so comfortable all the time, but then people see you're like, who is this absolute goober walking around in his joggers wearing his pajamas? No. The Doer joggers look so good. They are lightweight, they are stylish, they are relaxed, and beyond anything, they, again, are the most comfortable things I own. I wore them like 3 days in a row, which is a lot for a pair of pants. I absolutely love my Doers, and I know you're going to love them too. Check out Doer's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or shop online at shopdoer.com/PME. Right now, here's the thing. My listeners, you good people, listening to the Pat Mayo Experience, get 20% off your first purchase when you use my exclusive URL, shopdoer.com/PME. This is an awesome deal. Don't wait. Go get 20% off right now at shopdoer.com/PME. Tier number 3, I got Washington, San Francisco, Arizona, Seattle, Atlanta, and Tampa Bay. Those Tampa Bay bets are looking all right now. 9-1 to win the division. They're down to 3-1. To make the playoffs was plus 250. Got that. Now it's down to plus 150. And the over wins of 8.5 is down to minus 150 from plus 120. So we at least got good EV on all these Tampa Bay bets coming out of the bye. Mike Evans should be back. Jalen Daniels is most definitely hurt, right?
I think it's either hurt, yes, or also hurt and now a little scared to run. That's clearly whatever the issue is. There's something where it's not right, but I would lean a little bit towards not being 100% too, because some of the throws
are short.
They're
short.
Yeah.
Like,
so that's why. And if it's a rib issue.
When you can't get all the way through because of the rib injury, you're going to short arm it and everything's going to come up 2-3 yards short. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of bounce passes from Jalen Hurts. And his receivers aren't doing him like the most help in the world.
Hey, maybe that's his penance. I don't know. Stop throwing to the Browns. Stop the players, not the team. They stop throwing to Noah and Miami. Like that. Talk about drops. Holy. Like, they can't catch Jack. You know what crap? Like, what the hell is going on? So it's a lot that's going wrong. But again, a similar team where this is clearly not the Commanders. And I'm not saying they're going to be the Commanders at the beginning of the season where it was like, oh my God, these teams, like, this is just on a roll. I think they're better than this, but I think a lot of it's going to come down to your question is, what is Jaden Daniels? Because if Jaden Daniels isn't 100% for the rest of the year and this rib issue continues to be a rib issue, then they're not going to be a true contender. And then the defense is playing better. Is Lattimore going to get out there? Like, I'm feeling like you don't make this trade unless you know he's going to come back in a few weeks, but like you need him out there because your one deficiency is the secondary.
They got caught, though. They got caught at the trade deadline. He was banged up already. They had the game on Sunday. Then they immediately had a game on Thursday. That's just a bad luck for the trade deadline to follow that way for their schedule. That I assume he's back this week. Not that they need him. This would be a game to sit him if there ever was one against Dallas.
But did he even practice last week, though?
I mean, they only practiced 2 days. They were probably like, get yourself healthy,
like, he was out.
Like, why would you? Okay. If you have the banged up hamstring, you know you're not playing him anyway. Like, I don't want to see him out there. I want to see him rehabbing.
No, okay. So either way, like it's a question if he's out there. So okay, well if he's not out there against the Cowboys, are we just assuming that they're setting him for protection?
I don't know, to be honest, but I could see that being like if you can guarantee him basically 2 more weeks off right now because you don't need him against Dallas. I mean, hopefully they don't need him against Dallas. That'd be a real bad scene if they lost to Dallas. But That's what I would do. If I was convinced I was making the playoffs and you're a 10-point favorite against Dallas anyway, like if you can't beat Dallas without Lattimore, like you're not making the playoffs.
Then you should probably just hold them out through their bye because they have the Titans after that and then the week 14 bye. So you're not going to see Lattimore. Don't see Lattimore until week 15.
That actually kind of makes a lot of sense to me. Then a revenge game against the Saints coming out of the bye.
A revenge game from a corner. That'd be terrific. To go back real quick, I know we're focused on the Commanders right now. Actually, like we talked about it, I liked it at the time. I like your bet even more for the Buccaneers because for the Falcons coming out of their bye, that losing streak might hit 4 because they got the Chargers and then at Minnesota before they get the Raiders, Giants, Commanders, Panthers to finish things out. Like for your bet, you hope that continues to Kirk Cousins continues to play like bad Kirk Cousins and they get, I mean, at that point, so 2 more losses puts them at 6 and 7, and then you're looking real good.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole point of when I laid out the Tampa Bay bet, like when it was 9-1, I was like, this shouldn't be 9-1 just based on Tampa has the easiest schedule left. They have one hard game, and it's against the Chargers. And that's a game they could win. They won't be favored to win it, but they could win it.
They could. When is that? That's between the Raiders and Cowboys. So it's not like they're coming off anything crazy and it's on a normal week. So yeah, could win.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens with the Chargers. Like, do we expect them to basically run the table the rest of the year? Like, they almost went full Chargers. They didn't, but they almost did on Sunday night.
I think the fact that they did it is a little testament to who they are now. Is that they definitely tried to. So go back to that. The Chargers schedule is not the easiest either.
No, but they
have Baltimore, Kansas City, and Denver in there.
I actually think that's good for them to play those teams right now, like going into the playoffs, to get tested, to get ready for what you're going to see in January, because they're making it. Like, they're going to be there.
Isn't that crazy?
Chargers
are so different. You know what? Real quick, I was watching this game. I had this thought last night, is that the Chargers and the Broncos are 2 teams that are clear testaments that, fixing a team shouldn't take 6 years. Or even 4.
Yeah, you say that, but not all teams just randomly have what's essentially a top 5 quarterback on their roster that you can go take over. That solves a lot of problems.
No, but the Broncos didn't. The Broncos are playing a rookie.
Yeah, but the Broncos have been there for like 2 years now with Sean Payton to last year. You put your system in place. It doesn't work, but you get the bones of what you want. You evaluate your talent to see who you want for the system you want, and then go through it. But it's not like they didn't spend, what was Bo Nix, the 11th pick in the draft? Like, we didn't think that he was going to be good, but they thought he was going to be good. That's why they took him in the first round.
Right. But again, yes, that's 2 years. 1 year and 2 years. My point was it shouldn't take 4. That's what I said. It shouldn't take 4, 5, 6 years to, like, these organizations like the Panthers and the Giants and hell, even the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, like, they shouldn't take you this long.
Yeah, yes and no, but the Chargers and Broncos were pretty good last year, was the whole thing. Like, Herbert got hurt, then they went off, an edge, and they were playing Easton Stick, and then they lost all those games. The Broncos were like 8-9 last year. Like, they weren't bad.
The whole argument for the Giants was that they were good. That they're a playoff team.
Yeah, but they were a fake playoff team.
I know, I agree with you, but you had pieces there. Again, my point being is just all that. It's just a reclamation project shouldn't take 4 or 5 years. It shouldn't take half of a decade.
You're right. You're right, but some teams dig themselves into a hole too much, where then they have to they double down and compound their mistakes. Like, that's all Carolina is doing right now. Like, they have no O-line or D-line. Like, at least if you have a good, like, that's what Denver has. They have a good O-line. They have a good D-line. Like, once you're there, you can start building out. But if you're losing in the trenches every single time and you don't have exceptional talent to overcome that, or some like whiz kid coaching staff, like even someone like Mike McDaniel, who I like, has been able to overcome a terrible, awesome offensive line for like 3 or 4 years, but only with Tua, because they can game plan to get it out so quickly. Exactly like Washington did for the first 9 weeks of the season. Like, let's get the ball out early, or we'll get Jaden Daniels on the run. But now that we're seeing that Jaden Daniels is being a bit more pensive, he's not as mobile, the throws aren't there, he's looking a bit more scared, they're getting to him now.
They are. And that's where, so there was a whole conversation about the Kingsbury offense, and the Kingsbury offense, similar to your point earlier this season, where we're like, oh, is Brian Flores' defense going to get caught? Because it seems like it always does at some point of the season, like middle to late of the season. You go back at Kingsbury's offense, same thing. And again, we have this compounded. It's not really a fair situation because of the rib issue for Jaden Daniels. And that being said, is maybe that's why. But going back to that Commanders last game, like this is what I brought up. So 10 Win, who covers a lot of the games and scripts them out and shows video and everything, super great mind when it comes to what's going on schematically. But the Commanders kept it short, and short. First read, not their second read. And I actually looked at this and I went deep. Kingsbury and the Daniels offense, the second read is the issue. The second read, his ADOT is 2.3 yards for his second read. So it's basically, if my first read is not there, I'm throwing it at a guy 2 feet away from me. That's the next option. And that's the problem is teams now you see is they're holding that second line, basically behind the line, or the first line of the linebacker / safeties underneath where the corners are playing. They're staying up close, and they're just they're hitting them. And that's why some of those drops were actually players hitting the Commanders players that were, at the timing of it. So if this is an issue, I'm saying all this to say, this is why I have the legitimate threats about the Commanders, because if the Daniels passing is a rib issue, he's not going to be able to throw it further, and Kingsbury's going to be stuck with his old offense of everything being short.
Washington should be safe for the playoffs, but obviously they're the team that has the highest likelihood of falling out. Not necessarily they have some semi-difficult games. They have a ton of winnable ones, but the big thing that might bite them when we take a look at the NFC playoff picture is that they're currently the 7 seed. They'd have to play the Eagles. Obviously, we just saw that game. Not a great matchup for them, but Tampa is the team that I expect to go on a run here and maybe finish at 10-7, which is fully in the cards for them based on their schedule. And Tampa holds the tiebreak over them. So they could both be 10-7, then Washington gets bumped. I don't see the Rams, Seattle, or San Francisco. I guess San Francisco maybe, but nothing they have actually shown me would do that they just break off and go 12-5. Their best chance is just getting ahead of Arizona and winning the division and being the 3 seed or something like that. It feels like they're the 3 seed or they're not in the playoffs, weirdly enough, or they're the 4 seed if Atlanta can get to enough wins. But I worry about Tampa Bay coming back and stealing Washington's spot here. But Green Bay and Minnesota, Green Bay is, as much as I kind of down on Green Bay, I still feel like the house of cards is Minnesota.
That's where it falls apart because it's Sam Darnold, similar to Kirk Cousins.
In a way, it's just they seem off. They should really be scoring way more points than they score with this offense.
They watching that Titans game again. I didn't watch glued to it, and that's going to be more this afternoon to watch the actual plays. But from what I paid attention to, did not feel like they were winning that game for a good portion of it.
Well, let me ask you this. This is the Green Bay schedule. I'm just trying to figure out between Green Bay and Minnesota. I know Minnesota has the extra win and they hold the tiebreak, but they have to play each other again. Yeah. Minnesota on the way out is at the Bears, Cardinals, Falcons, Bears, Seahawks, Packers, Lions. They don't have an easy game left. You can say that the Bears aren't good, but that's a divisional game, and the Bears are kind of constructed, I think, to give the Vikings some problems. Obviously, the Vikings are better, but they could split with the Bears there, and the rest of those are... They'll be favored in some of them. They'll be underdogs in some of them. But most of those are just straight up coin flips all the way out. Then you have Green Bay. Maybe I assessed the NFC wrong here. Green Bay is home Niners, home Dolphins, at Lions, at Seahawks. That could be 4-0 or 0-4, honestly, against all those teams. That's probably 2-2. They probably lose to the Niners and Lions. And they beat the Dolphins and Seahawks. They could beat the Niners and lose to the Dolphins. Who knows? Then Saints, Vikings, Bears to end the season. It's no guarantee that they get to 11 wins. There could be a bunch of teams stuck at 10 in the NFC, it looks like, if things break the right way.
That's where I was going to go with it. I think there's a lot of teams that could just be in the mix, and a lot of these are playoff teams that play each other because you mentioned the Seahawks that are in there. I honestly think that the Rams aren't dead yet. And you look at their schedule, they have Philly this week, which is rough, but the Saints, Bills, it's a bad schedule, and then it softens. But Bills, 49ers, but then Jets, Cardinals at home, Seahawks at home. They get 2 division games to finish things out. I don't think they're winning the division, but there's the NFC is beyond a mess. The NFC, you could go, because you bring up the Buccaneers, and they're actually right now the 11th team. Yeah, the 11th team at 4-6. And they're in it. The way the schedule goes, we're going to have a much clearer picture by the time 3 weeks from now. But as of right now, you have 11 teams versus 8 in the AFC. And AFC, maybe it's already locked at 7.
Yeah. The AFC, unless it's the Colts, as we kind of went through, it seems like no one else can really make it.
No. Let's look at the No, the Bears. I was going to say, if the Bears get some semblance of an offense like they did yesterday, but no, their schedule is bad.
Yeah. Kind of tough.
Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, Packers. They're all playoff contenders the rest of the way for the Bears.
Just trying to look at some of the futures here. I'm just trying to find where the best odds are right now for the NFC South. Where are we at here? NFC South. Yeah,
the Bears might not win another game. Honestly,
yeah, but their defense can grind enough they could win like.
No, I know they could.
Yeah. They could lose out. They probably want to lose out. Honestly, if they're not making the playoffs, why even get the better draft pick?
Get some more weapons.
Get some offensive.
Get another wide receiver.
Yeah,
they has all the wide receivers.
The Bucks are 4-1 at Coolbet right now to win the division. I don't know if I love that. That seems about right of where they should be right now. Because you still have to bank on the Falcons losing these games, which they might not do. That's why, although 365 still has the plus 120 on the 8.5 over, if you like that, and plus 211 to make the playoffs. Those aren't bad. Any other teams you really want to talk about? Like, everyone else seems kind of dead, like my tier 4, 5, 6, and 7. So the rest of the power rankings starting at number 18, I have the Bengals at 18, Miami, the Rams, the Colts, and Chicago. That's a tier. Then the Saints, Jets, Browns, Patriots, Vegas, and Giants. That's a tier. Then Carolina, Dallas, Jacksonville, and Tennessee are the bottom 4.
I almost feel like the Raiders and Giants should be on that bottom tier too.
Brock Bowers
Not
is
that,
fun.
Like, we really care. Yeah, but what? They have 2 players?
Yeah, Max Crosby. Let's get Desmond Ridder in there. See what we can do.
Yeah, they don't want to do that because they don't want to potentially risk winning a game. They want their quarterback too. That's why I put them at the bottom. The Giants and the Raiders are both playing, hopefully, for quarterbacks. So, it's nitpicky, but you tell me the Browns are beating both of those teams.
You know what the Giants are going to do, right? Next year? Like, I see it.
100%.
I have clarity on the situation. They are not going to draft a quarterback. They'll draft someone else because they'll get screwed with like a bad draft pick or something like that. And all of like there's 2 really good quarterbacks in this draft?
Yeah, yes, but people will argue differently.
Like it's Ward and Sanders, right?
It is Ward and Sanders, but people keep wanting to throw other people in there. So,
sure.
No, so I was going to tell you what they're going to do. You tell what you're going to say, because I'm going to tell you what they're really going to do.
They're going to sign Sam Darnold to like a 4-year, $170 million deal is what they're going to do.
No, the Giants are going to win too many games, knock themselves out of getting Sanders or Ward. And then with the 7th, 8th pick, because that's where they drafted Daniel Jones, or was it the 6th pick?
6.
Whatever it might be. Yeah, they're going to go draft Garrett Heineke, that Nussmeier, because everybody's like, oh, like Nussmeier. And they're just going to be right back in the same damn boat they are, and this is why the Giants organization is trash.
The Saints have been kind of fun. Taysom Hill game. I bet the under on his rushing yard. So I got estimate correct. Listen, if you're going to lose a bet, you want to lose it by over 100 yards. That's the way you want to do it.
Did you know, I tweeted that out after the game. It doesn't, because he's eligible at quarterback and tight end, and then some random, I think it's my fantasy league somewhere you could have chose to let him be eligible at wide receiver. He is the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 running back, the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 tight end. It doesn't matter what position he was eligible at. He is the number 1 in all of them this week.
That's amazing. And it's funny because he only had 9 rushing yards at halftime. I was like, this is going to hit easily. Like, they're only going to use him in short yardage situations. So, like, the most he's ever going to get. And they did only use him in short yardage situations. Just the Browns can't tackle. He just kept busting big runs.
And you know what? As a complete aside, I know it's funny, but that's the testament to the whole thing about stacked boxes. And everybody always gets panicked and say like, oh, this running back faces more stacked boxes than anybody. But that's also good for depending on who the running back is, because all it takes is making one person miss and then you're gone, just like Taysom Hill.
It's the Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley corollary that they have a lot of runs that are like -1 yard because the box is stacked. But if they ever just break through that second tier of linebackers, they're gone.
Yep. Yeah. That's why, like, I don't really care that much about, like, rushes for negative or 0 yards. Or like, that's actually some of the best running backs in the league are near the top.
Yeah, no one loves running negative plays more than the Dolphins do. They love a negative play. And somehow, the Seahawks got a new center and still had a bad snap over Geno's head for, I think, the 4th consecutive game.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it was a new center, but that was a new center because he retired.
That's what I mean. Let's
out of the blue.
The old center had three horrendous, at least three horrendous snaps. That like every like if you're flicking through channels, like you don't have all the screens on at once. At some point, you will flick to the Seahawks game and watch Geno and Kenneth Walker sprinting towards their own end zone trying to jump on a ball.
Did we ever get an answer on that? Why he retired?
Too cursed?
Was this like one of those, like, you either get fired or you retired? Like, this your choice?
I don't know. I mean, listen, the Michael Mayer came back this week. He had been having personal issues. I don't know what they are, but some people just need to step away for some time. Like
Yeah.
Andrew Luck retired.
I was going to say, we kind of feel that right around have you hit it yet? Usually you and I talk about that, needing that second win right around Thanksgiving. I haven't hit that I need my second win yet, but I can feel it's getting close.
No, I've been pacing myself pretty well this year that I haven't felt that yet. Like my overwhelming week was the week that I was doing double content of NFL, but I was in Montreal for the President's Cup covering that as well. Like those were long days.
Oh, yeah. I bet.
So everything else compared to that week has just been easy street. Like regular NFL, yeah, let's talk.
Well, the biggest thing that's wearing on me is the answering all the comments and now answering the question for the 700th time and trying to be nice about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do that, so I alleviate the pressure off myself that way.
You get the benefit of that.
I do. All right, Jake Ciely at theathletic.com, at allinkid. Anything else you want to say?
No. Fun times.
Yeah.
I like your bet tonight.
Thank you. I hope
This is
works.
probably the one I like the most so far.
The betting on Houston or the underdog play?
The underdog play. It's probably my favorite underdog play so far, which means
it's going to
go
lose.
0-3.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you might as well just take the other side. I actually have the tail link if you want to tail it or fade it, you can bring it up on Underdog if you go to the newsletter right now. All the fantasy pickups are there. All the injuries are there. And these power rankings are there as well. If you are ever looking for them, you can find that down in the show notes right now. Smash like and sub to the channel while you are here. And we'll see you next time.
Mayo experience. Experience.